It happened during the middle of the season, one of those late afternoon practices when the air feels heavy and the field smells like rain and grass. Liam had been pushing harder than anyone else that week. He always did. The guy had this energy, this determination that made everyone else look lazy. But sometimes that same fire burned him out. I still remember the sound he made when he fell. Just a sharp breath, then silence. The whole field stopped moving. Coach Daniels was the first to rush over, and when I got there, Liam was holding his ankle, his face pale, trying not to let anyone see how much it hurt. We helped him off the field and into the locker room. He tried to joke, saying, "Guess I just wanted some time off," but his voice shook a little. After the medic wrapped his ankle, Coach turned to me and said, "Evan, you live in the same dorm. Keep an eye on him for a few days, will you?" I nodded without thinking. It seemed simple enough. Help a teammate, make sure he's okay. But I didn't know that small favor would change how I saw everything. Liam was one of those guys who made friends easily. Everyone liked him. He'd tease you, laugh with you, get you to open up even if you didn't plan to. But after the injury, something in him went quiet. He spent more time alone, watching games on his laptop, pretending not to care that he couldn't play. I'd stop by after practice, drop off food, make sure he had what he needed. He'd thank me, then we'd talk for a bit. About school, the team, random stuff. At first, it felt like I was just being a good teammate. That's what Coach asked for, but then it started to feel like more. One night, we ordered pizza and watched an old match from the year before. Liam laughed at himself on screen, saying, "Look at that haircut, what was I thinking?" I laughed too. But what I noticed wasn't the joke. It was the way his face lit up, how different he looked when he forgot to hide his frustration. He caught me looking and asked, "What?" I shook my head and said, "Nothing, just glad you're feeling better." It was true, but my voice came out softer than I meant. After that, we talked more. About things that had nothing to do with soccer. He told me he missed home sometimes, but didn't like to admit it. I told him how my boyfriend, Ryan, and I had been fighting lately, how distance made things harder than I expected. Liam didn't say much, just listened in that quiet way that made it feel safe to talk. When I finished, he said, "You sound like you care a lot." I told him I did. And then he said, "He's lucky." That line stayed in my head long after I left his room. Over the next few weeks, Liam's ankle got better, but he still wasn't cleared to play. I kept helping him stretch, walking him to the gym, waiting outside while he trained lightly. Sometimes we'd grab coffee afterward. It wasn't part of what Coach asked me to do, but it felt natural, like a routine I didn't want to give up. Still, I noticed how it was changing me. Ryan would text, and I'd take longer to reply. Calls felt shorter. I'd tell myself I was just tired, that things would go back to normal soon. But every time I saw Liam smile at me, a small part of me hoped they wouldn't. One evening, after a long day of classes, I stopped by his room. He was sitting by the window, a brace still around his ankle, watching the rain hit the glass. "You ever think about quitting?" he asked suddenly. "All the pressure, the pain. Sometimes it doesn't feel worth it." I told him I knew what he meant. I said maybe it wasn't about the game, but the people who make it matter. He looked at me then, like he was searching for something behind my words. The room went quiet. I could hear the rain, the hum of the radiator, and his breathing, steady, close. He smiled faintly. "You always know what to say," he whispered. I laughed under my breath and told him, "Not always." But even as I said it, I knew the truth. There was something between us now, something unspoken but real. I tried to ignore it, to pretend it was just friendship. But that night, as I walked back to my room, I realized how deep I'd already fallen into this connection I couldn't define. When I reached my door, my phone buzzed, Ryan's name on the screen. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I just stood there, thinking about the promise I made to watch over my teammate. I had done that, but somewhere along the way, I started watching over something else, something I didn't mean to find, and something I wasn't sure I was ready to face. The weekend tournament came up fast, but Liam wasn't cleared to travel. Most of the team left Friday morning, the bus rolling out of the parking lot before sunrise. Coach gave me a pat on the shoulder and said, "Keep an eye on Brooks, will you?" The same words again, I nodded, pretending not to feel the strange mix of dread and anticipation building in my chest. That afternoon, the campus was unusually quiet. Rain started falling, soft at first, then harder, filling the silence with its rhythm. I stopped by Liam's room with takeout containers and a movie. He was stretched across the couch, his ankle propped up, wearing a loose hoodie. He looked tired but smiled when he saw me. "Guess it's just us this weekend," he said. I smiled back, pretending it was no big deal. But it felt different, being there with no one else around. We watched a comedy at first, laughing, throwing popcorn like kids. The light from the TV flickered across his face, and every now and then I caught myself watching him instead of the screen. When the movie ended, we didn't start another. Instead, the room fell quiet, except for the rain tapping the window. Liam leaned back, resting his head against the couch. "You ever feel like you're missing something?" he asked softly. I asked him what he meant. He shrugged. "I don't know. Like you're doing everything right, but it still feels like something's off." I hesitated before answering. "Yeah," I said finally. "Lately, more than I'd like to admit." He nodded, like he already knew. For a long time, neither of us said anything. The kind of silence that feels heavy but not uncomfortable. Just full. After a while, I stood to grab water from the small fridge, trying to shake the feeling. Liam said, "Evan, can I ask you something?" I turned around, bottle in hand. "Sure. Are you happy?" The question caught me off guard. I laughed nervously. "That's a big question." He looked serious, his eyes not leaving mine. "I mean it." "With Ryan, are you happy?" I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the rain outside, letting the question hang there. Finally, I said, "I think so. He's good to me. We've just been distant. Life gets busy, you know." Liam nodded slowly. "Yeah, I get that." He paused. "Sometimes I think people drift not because they stop caring, but because they stop being seen." Something about that line hit me. Maybe because it felt true. Maybe because it felt like he was talking about both of us. The power flickered once, twice, then went out completely. The TV went dark. The only light came from the window, soft, gray, and cold. Liam groaned. "Guess the storm winds." I laughed quietly. "Figures." We sat in the dim light for a while. The rain was heavier now, thunder rolling in the distance. Liam shifted closer, wrapping the blanket around his shoulders. "You cold?" he asked. "A little," I admitted. He lifted one side of the blanket without a word. I hesitated for a second, then sat beside him. The couch wasn't big, and the air between us felt smaller than it should have. I could hear his breathing, slow and even. We didn't talk. There was nothing left to say, but I could feel the weight of everything we weren't saying pressing down. After a few minutes, Liam spoke, barely above a whisper. "Evan, thank you for not giving up on me. A lot of people stop showing up when things get hard." I looked at him. "I wouldn't do that. I know," he said. "That's what scares me." I didn't know what he meant, and maybe I didn't want to, because part of me understood too well. We stayed like that, quiet, until the storm finally eased. I stood to leave, pretending I didn't notice the ache in my chest. "I should probably head back," I said. "It's late," Liam nodded, eyes low. "Yeah, thanks for everything today," I smiled faintly. "Get some rest, all right?" When I stepped into the hallway, the air felt cooler, sharper. I took a few deep breaths trying to clear my head. Back in my room, I changed into a hoodie, lay on the bed, and stared at the ceiling. My phone buzzed, Ryan again. A missed call, a text. "Sorry, long day. Miss you." Before I could reply, another message popped up. This one from Liam. Just a few words. "Sorry if I made things weird tonight." I read it over and over. I started typing a reply, then deleted it. Typed again. Deleted again. I didn't know what to say that wouldn't make it worse, or truer. Finally, I turned off the phone and let it rest on my chest. The rain outside was just a faint whisper now. I closed my eyes, trying to remind myself that I had done nothing wrong. But the more I told myself that, the less I believed it. Because deep down, I knew what was happening wasn't just about kindness or friendship anymore. It was about something I couldn't name, and maybe didn't want to. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the blinds, painting thin gold lines across my room. I hadn't slept much, My phone was still on the nightstand, both messages unread, one from Ryan, one from Liam. I stared at them for a while, then finally decided to shower and clear my head. When I got out, I saw another message. This one from Ryan again. Surprise! I'm coming by today. I want to see you. My stomach twisted. It had been weeks since we'd seen each other. Normally I'd be excited, but today, all I could think about was the storm, the blanket, and the silence that still lingered between me and Liam. By afternoon, Ryan was standing at my door, smiling that familiar smile that used to make everything feel simple. I hugged him, but it felt different, like something between us had shifted. He looked around the room, noticing the extra water bottles, the folded blanket from Liam's place on my chair. "You've been busy," he said casually. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Just helping out with Liam since he got hurt," Ryan grinned. "Always the team player." He said it lightly, but there was something in his tone that made me uncomfortable. Later that day, I offered to stop by Liam's room to check on him, and Ryan came along. When I knocked, Liam opened the door, surprised to see both of us. He smiled politely, greeting Ryan, but I could sense the tension in the room. It was subtle, too quiet, too polite. Liam thanked me for the food I'd brought, then turned to Ryan and said, "You've got a good guy here." Ryan laughed and put his arm around me. "Yeah, I know," I smiled, but the moment felt hollow. It wasn't jealousy I saw in Liam's eyes, it was distance. Like something unspoken had finally settled between us. We didn't stay long. When we left, I could feel Liam's gaze following me until the door closed. Ryan and I walked in silence for a while. Then he said, "You've been different lately, distant." I stopped walking. "I've just been tired, that's all." He looked at me for a long moment, like he wanted to believe it but couldn't. "Evan, if there's something wrong, I want to know." I took a breath. "I don't know what's wrong. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything." He didn't say anything after that. We went back to my room, talked about small things, tried to laugh like we used to. But it all felt like pretending. Later, when he fell asleep beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how love could still exist, even when it didn't fit right anymore. The next morning, Ryan left early for work. I sat by the window, watching the field outside glisten under the morning light. I knew I had to talk to Liam, really talk. When I reached his room, he was packing up some things. The brace was gone, replaced by a slight limp, but he looked stronger. "You're walking," I said, smiling. "Yeah," he said. "Feels good to move again." We stood there for a moment before I finally said what had been sitting in my chest for days. "About the other night?" He shook his head gently. "You don't have to explain?" "Yes, I do," I said quietly. "You mean a lot to me, Liam, more than I expected. But I also know I crossed lines I shouldn't have, even if it was just in my head. I'm sorry if I made things confusing." He looked down for a second, then met my eyes. "You didn't make it confusing. Life did," he smiled sadly. "Sometimes people come into your life to remind you what it feels like to be seen." "That's all?" I felt a lump in my throat. "I don't want this to end weird between us." "It won't," he said. "You helped me when I needed it." "That's what I'll remember." We talked for a while longer, about soccer, the team, the next season. When I finally stood to leave, he said, "Take care of yourself, Evan." I nodded, knowing it meant more than it sounded. Months passed. The season picked up again. Liam returned to the field, and things found their rhythm. Ryan and I tried to rebuild what we had. Some days it felt real again. Other days it felt like holding on to something we'd already lost. One evening, as the team huddled before a match, I caught Liam's eye across the field. He gave me a small nod, a quiet acknowledgement that we were both okay. I smiled back. Later that night, walking home under the stadium lights, I thought about everything that had happened. The promises, the silences, the lessons. I realized that love isn't always about staying. Sometimes it's about understanding when to let something remain unspoken. In a world that moves so fast, it's easy to forget the small moments that shape us, the look that lingers, the words left unsaid, the connection that teaches you something about yourself. Watching over Liam had started as a favor, but it became something much deeper. A reminder that the heart doesn't follow rules, only honesty. And though what happened between us never became more than a quiet ache, it was real. It changed me. It made me see that caring for someone doesn't always mean keeping them. It just means you were there, in that moment, when they needed you most.